Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. 24 hours after the Prime Minister's powerful reassurance to Christians, the VHP has claimed that the media has misunderstood Mr. Modi and he was in fact warning Christians to accept and respect the Hindu faith. The VHP has also said that the Ghar Wapsi and protests against love jihad will continue. So now, how do India's Christians respond to the situation they face? That's the key issue I shall explore in part 2 with the head of the Catholic Church in Delhi, Archbishop Anil Kuto. But first, the head of the Censor Board, Prahlad Nihalani, has issued guidelines barring the use of 28 different swear words in English or Hindi films. This directive has not only annoyed filmmakers who yesterday protested to the government, but it's also upset members of the Censor Board itself. In a country that has the world's biggest film industry, the issue is a fundamental concern to producers and audiences alike. So in part 1, we ask, has Mr. Nihalani made a terrible mistake? Or does he have a case that needs to be better understood, even if his response is not the right one? Now, joining me to discuss the Censor Board's directive is the well-known author and columnist Ruchir Joshi, the head of the Centre for Public Affairs and Critical Theory at Shiv Nazar University, Dipankar Gupta, one of India's foremost directors, Amir Raza Hussain, the president of the Film and Television Producers Guild, Mukesh Bhatt, and a member of the Censor Board, Ashok Pandit. I personally contacted the chairman of the Censor Board, Prahlad Nihalani, and the CEO, Shravan Kumar, but neither were prepared to join us. This is despite the fact Mr. Nihalani assured me that the CEO would in fact participate in tonight's discussion. Let me start with you, Dipankar Gupta. The new chairman of the Censor Board, Prahlad Nihalani, has listed 13 English swear words and 15 Hindi swear words, which he says cannot be used in films. Separately, he's told the Hindu newspaper that this is to protect young viewers. Now, these words include simple words like haramzada and bastard, which Sadhavis and politicians use every day. What's your initial response to this order?
Well, yes. Bastard is a descriptive term with legal implications, I think. But other than that, I'm quite shocked at it because to restrict the use of certain words in films is certainly tampering on freedom of expression. But other than that, 15 words from here and 13 words from there, in a country as linguistically rich as India, it's a shame that we only have 15 bad words in Hindi. I think there are many more. So what is he saying? Is he saying, as one of the commentators earlier said, there's all right to use other cuss words? So this kind of ban on a particular, or on some words is, I think, most unfortunate, and it speaks very poorly of the Censor Board. And I'm very happy that members of the Censor Board too are upset about this.
Ruchir Joshi, some of the words that are barred are actually words of everyday speech. Words like dick in English and the system are the curses that in Hindi are used colloquially by many people, particularly in North India. Now, no doubt, this is perhaps distasteful use of language, maybe it's inappropriate, but it's how people speak. So can you bar filmmakers from using them in their films?
Karan, first of all, I would like to say a broad and cheerful hello to all the people of Bombay, all your viewers in Bombay, and the people who are members of the Bombay film industry. Hi Bombay, how are you doing? This thing is getting completely absurd. Along with all these words, we now find that the word Bombay has been blipped out of a song because it offends somebody in the Shiv Sena, or it may do, and we are not allowed to use Bombay or Calcutta or Madras or Bangalore when we feel like it. I mean, the whole thing is going to a completely absurd level, and what's going to happen after that is there's going to be an equally absurd kickback from people on the net, in the funny programs, in the films. There will be a very strong reaction to this absurdity. Just as we are finding that India is a mature country and we are looking at films which actually reproduce how we speak, they reproduce how we interact with each other. They reproduce very graphically the violence that's spread all over the country, including knifings, shootings in the head, rapes, people driving cars over each other. Now, if all that can be allowed, which is far more, I would say, have far more a detrimental effect on young people's minds, how are you going to ban normal speech?
Quite right.
I mean, this is absolutely absurd, and this is something which we have to laugh out of court and at the same time very quietly and relentlessly protest against in our films, in our speech, in our print, in our conversation.
Amir Raza Hussain, some of the words that in fact Mr. Nehlani has objected to are actually not swear words. They are words that describe things people do. Words like masturbating and the F word. And the peculiar situation that follows is that films can show lovemaking but not use the F word. Isn't that bizarre?
I think he's doing a great job, I think he wants us to go back to making silent movies. I think he wants us to get rid of all sound in movies and go back to making sound movies. I cannot believe in 2015 we are in a serious channel with such a serious anchor debating words like bastard and the F word, whether they should be allowed in cinema or not. I think it's a joke. It's a complete joke. And I might add, Karan, that many years ago I was on the appellate tribunal of the Film Censor Board, and Mr. Nehlani came to me after the Censor Board had cut out a scene of his where he used a mild cuss word. He came to us in appeal, and of course we allowed the word and we allowed the scene. And I'm surprised that, the same gentleman should turn around and say that you can't use, and you can't use Mumbai for God's sakes. You can't use Bombay for God's sake. I'm really shocked.
Mukesh
Bhatt, but
you come to us today as the president of the Film and Television Guild of Producers in India. What's your response as a professional filmmaker to these guidelines laid down by Mr. Nehlani?
See, Karan, I personally, on a personal note, was completely shocked by the way Professor Nehlani has behaved, because he's one of us. And as we just heard now, that he himself, when he was a filmmaker, gone to the tribunal to get one of his curse words passed. What happened all of a sudden when he shifted and sat on the other chair? This is something which is absolutely ridiculous. And also I want to say one thing is that today, looking at the Make India vision of the Prime Minister, we are talking about foreign investors coming into this country to invest. We have the largest entertainment industry in the East, in Asia. How do you expect the foreign studios to invest when these ridiculous rules are getting passed overnight by individuals? And they are interpreting, he says that this is in the law. Sorry, it's not in the law.
Okay.
This curse word to be eliminated, it does not exist. You have to see whatever the curse word is in total reference to in what context it is said, not in isolation. What I want to tell you is that today, as a filmmaker, I invest crores and crores of rupees because today filmmaking is expensive. And on a principle that these words can be clear or these can be passed. And suddenly, 1 year down the line, some new censor board chief comes and he gets up to apply his own set of rules as per his whims and fancies. Where does the investor go? Where does the filmmaker go?
Absolutely.
There has to be, see, we have over the years sat down to implement a new Cinematograph Act bill, which the earlier government was stalling. Now this government is now, because we come last in the priority list. The tragedy of the entertainment industry is that we don't come in the priority list.
Mukesh Bhatt,
call us the soft
you're making a fair point, but I want to bring in Ashok Pandit, who is not just a member of the Censor Board and therefore one of Mr. Nehlani's colleagues on that board of film certification, but in addition who's put out a very interesting tweet. In your tweet, Ashok Pandit, you said, if I'm portraying the character of Dawood, he will use the language as per his character and not what a saint would use. So as a member of the Censor Board, are you actually saying that this order is not just unrealistic, it's perhaps close to being nonsensical?
Karan, I also, as a president of the Indian Film and Television Directors Association, I was shocked when we came to know through media that this list has been issued where the industry has been told that these cuss words cannot be used. Well, I think we belong to an industry where we have intelligent filmmakers, we have people who have their mind of their own, and they have a reputation. They are dignified and people with integrity who make films, both the producers and the directors. And coming out suddenly with this kind of a list where we were not even aware of it, and the reason being given by us, by Pelaji, is that this already was there earlier in the law. Now, the reason, what I'm feeling sad about is that we as filmmakers, it was great of the government of India, where the new panel which was brought in Censor Board, where people who belong to the industry. So what we had thought, what we had in my mind, and I had in my mind, and other colleagues of Censor Board had in mind, that now the difference between the CBFC and the film industry should be over, and both will sit together and come out with new things where the archival laws and archival things of 52 and 53 will
rather
be
than enforce old laws, change
with the vision of the government, with the vision of our Prime Minister, we will proceed further. We will go ahead and we will prove that this industry is really an industry where we had great.
What you're saying, Ashok Pandit, is that Prahlad Nilani is taking you backwards rather than forwards. Isn't that what you're saying?
Yeah, we have to move forward. We have to. You cannot make a film on a dacoit or a sex worker with having the lines of a saint and a religious figure. See, every film, every subject has its own requirement. Every character has its own requirement. You cannot generalize that these terms cannot be used. And I'm amazed. I was asking myself that apart from this 28 cuss words, can you use another 150 cuss words in the film? See, it's very
presumably
the answer,
Ashok Pandit, is presumably you can. That was the precise point made a moment ago by Dipankar Gupta.
Part of the industry is coming out of with this kind of fatwa.
Let me point out at this moment to the audience that it is really a shame and a pity that Prahlad Nilani or Shravan Kumar, the CEO of the Censor Board, are not with us, because this would have given them an opportunity to present their case to see whether anyone on the panel agrees. Let me now do it for them, because they're not here to do it themselves. Their argument, and I'm going to put it to you, is this, Dipankar Gupta. They say, surely there is a case for saying that such language should not be permitted in films that are cleared for general release, particularly where children, say under the age of 14, are watching. Would you say that children should be protected from such language?
Well, children actually hear this language around them. So protecting them from hearing them in films, I don't think is going to make much of a difference. What is more important is how appropriately are they used. If they use inappropriately, it will be offensive not only to children, but to grown-ups as well. It's just bad filmmaking, is the unprofessional work. And I think that if the scene demands a certain kind of language, even violence up to a point, it's perfectly all right, it's permissible.
What about the case of a Topori or an equivalent who uses the sister curse word or the mother curse word all the time because that's how he speaks? Is it acceptable for that to be how he speaks on a film as well?
Well, I suppose if the context is that, and then if you take those words away, it will just lose its authenticity. That must be retained. So yes, of course, you don't go on and on and on in the film, because that it becomes boring.
But you have to give it that flavoring.
That's right. It becomes repetitive and becomes unnecessary after a point. But
let me pursue that point with you, Ruchir Joshi. Most people would say that children, particularly children under the age of 14, have to be protected from scenes of violence, from scenes of sex. In a sense, you were saying that yourself in your first answer. But should they be protected from the bad language around them, particularly when they anyway hear it every day on the streets and on the school grounds where they go?
Well, Karan, there's two arguments to this. In England, for example, they have something called the watershed time, which is, I think, 9:30 or 10. And that's for television. After 10 o'clock on radio and television, you can use a strong language. You can use language which is closer to how people normally speak. But before 10 o'clock, when children are normally watching TV at home, there was, till recently, I think, I don't know if it's still there, a restriction on the use of the F word and the S word and all the rest of it, which many people thought was quite reasonable for television. I think some kind of a formula like that could be worked out for films as well. where the adult version of a film could be released separately and be treated separately, and a blipped out version could be released for daytime release. But ultimately, you see, it's all part of a piece. What are you going to do about the sexual innuendos? What are you going to do about the violence? What are you going to do about the kind of money porn that you see in films, which I find quite offensive myself, that young children are being taught to worship fast cars and glitter and gold. I find that actually more shocking and more worrying than a few bad words here and there, which of course they all hear on the streets. So it's a complex issue. But for the Censor Board to announce something like this just shows how moribund an institution it is. We keep railing against Thackeray and all his philosophies, but we are unwilling to remove 19th century laws like the censor, like the Telegraph, or whatever the act is under which the censorship is still continuing. That Censor Board is has almost no function in this country, and we are giving it more and more powers. I find that quite absurd.
Mukesh, but you were arguing in favor of the freedom of the director to be creative and to be able to make the sort of films that he believes reflect reality. On the other hand, let me put an opposite viewpoint to you. Children, no doubt, hear swear words in their locality, they hear them from their friends. But it's a different thing when you hear them on a film, because there it then acquires A, a certain legitimacy, and B, a certain trendiness. And that becomes more difficult for parents to tell their children not to imitate. Don't you think, therefore, there needs to be greater caution when these words and this sort of vocabulary comes in a film?
See, Karan, one thing is very clear. I'm not saying that the curse word should be there in a U certificate film. For the children, we have films which doesn't have these words. But as an adult, if I want to see a Gangs of Wasseypur, or if I want to see any film for that matter, as an adult I should be allowed. We're talking about the domain of the cinema halls. I'm not talking about television. I'm not talking about public spaces where you have children exposed to these kind of languages.
Can I interrupt you? Would you therefore accept that when these words appear in films, those films should not be for general release? They shouldn't be U certificate but A certificate, so that children above the age of 15 see them, not under? Would you accept that?
No, definitely, yes. If the curse word is there, I feel it should be there definitely above a certain age limit, say 15 or 18 for that matter, for adults to see it. And then see, there should be film certification. Censor Board is redundant, done to death. The world has moved on. We're talking about digital era. So, what are we doing? As an adult, I've got a right to see what I want to. We are telling very clearly it's an A certificate film. And then it's a personal choice of a person whether he wants to see that film or not.
So what you're saying is, don't infantilize adults, don't set the standards for adults that you actually apply to children, because that is treating adults like children, which is wrong.
Yeah, it's like what Mr. Nelani is saying is that the mindset of the child and the mindset of Mukesh, but 61 years old, should be the same.
Let me bring in at this point Ashok Pandit, and then I'm going to go to Amir Raza Hussain. Ashok Pandit, is there a danger that whether you limit this for films that are A certificate and above, or whether you make it available to all people, what you're doing by setting these guidelines and putting restrictions on the language and vocabulary that directors can use, is you're trespassing A, on creative liberty, and B, on the freedom to make realistic films? Or is that an element of trespassing we have to accept? Because let me give you an example. It's not just swear words that Mr. Nehlani is opposed to. He's also opposed to puns and double entendres. And now, puns and double entendres are a form of wit, satire and humor. But he doesn't like them either, because he thinks they have double meanings that could mislead people. So, is there not a danger that this can really spin out of control?
Karan, I have a very clear thought on this. I think let us not undermine the intelligence of children, children we call. Today's time, a 3-year-old child operates your mobile and he plays video games. And thinking what we used to think about a child 15 years back or 10 years back, things are not the same. So we have to address this issue also. Today's child is not a child anymore. He's matured the day he's born because of the things and facilities which are around him. So we are addressing to a so-called child who's not a child, who's already matured. So let us not undermine the intelligence of a child today. See, I deal with lot of youngsters. I do a lot of workshops with them in mass communication colleges and also. I go there to learn from them. So let us not be very naive in saying that, yeah, they are children, they should not see this, they should not watch that. They know what they want to see, they know what they want to see. Let us stop preaching and let's stop teaching. And another thing which I want to make very clear is that all the films, great films which have cuss words, have got national awards. Madhur Bhandaskar's Chandi Bar has got national award. Pastry has got national award. Anurag Kashyap, a great filmmaker, has got national award. Vishal Bhardwaj, a great filmmaker, his film has got national awards. On one side we give them national awards, and on the other side we tell them, please don't use this language. Is this not a hypocrisy?
Absolutely. You know, there's an important point made by Amir Raza Hussain, that we're doing all of this, or so Mr. Nilani says, to protect young viewers. But the truth of the matter is that the young in many ways are more advanced, more precocious and more mature than we give them credit for. It's not as if we're in the 1920s and 30s where children stayed children well into their teens. Now, they've become much more precocious at an earlier age. So are we first of all misunderstanding the nature and maturity of children, and therefore as a result misunderstanding the need to protect them?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. We are not misunderstanding it. I don't know. I think there's this great hypocrisy about this whole situation as we see it now. But what I don't understand is, when there is a U certificate, a UA certificate and an A certificate, where is the need to make out a list of cuss words? I don't know. You know, for the last 20 years we've been seeing and hearing cuss words in the film industry. I cannot imagine what is the need to do this now. I can only see this, you know, I've seen a few other talk shows on this same subject, and I can see, and what I have gathered is that this is coming from some kind of moral policing by the Sangh Parivar, which doesn't want the use of these words. That is what I have seen in the last 2-3 days on various Hindi channels.
Okay.
And that is disgraceful. Therefore, you have Bombay. Therefore, you have, you know, someone banning the use of Bombay. I think it all is going back, is not going back to, you know, us thinking that our children are are not mature enough to know cuss words. I think it's all going back to
political
the kind of atmosphere that we have built in this country in the last 6, 7, 8 months.
Let me put that thought to
which is
Dipankar
unfortunate.
Gupta. Would you agree that this is being done under the guise of protecting children, but in fact it reflects, as Amir Raza Hussain suspects, a certain political straitjacketing, a certain political viewpoint which is being imposed upon us through the Censor Board?
I think he's right. He's absolutely right in that. I think to a large extent Mr. Nilani is trying to be more loyal than the king. You know, he's overdoing it. But the fact of the matter is that you have a Censor Board. A Censor Board's job is not to tick boxes, but it's a deliberative, thoughtful process they go through. And if they feel a certain word is out of context, then of course they have a point in excising it. But all of this is contextual. You can't see any of these things out of context. So to say that a particular word is bad only if the context doesn't demand it. The second point is children's films. You have the Censor Board, Mr. Hussain said quite rightly, the Censor Board's job is to, you know, separate children's film from adult films and so forth. But can you imagine a children's film, a pure children's film, Walt Disney film, Woody Woodpecker film, which would use cuss words? Makes no sense at all. But when a so-called cuss word is used, if it is in a certain context, like violence, if it is in a certain context, then that is not fetishized.
So in other words, what you're saying is Mr. Nilani is imposing a censor control on children's films where he doesn't need to, because good children's film actually wouldn't use cuss words. They make no sense at all.
They make no sense at all.
You know, we're talking about whether this is happening, Ruchir Joshi, within a particular context of political straitjacketing. And I noticed in today's Times of India that side by side with Mr. Nilani's order on swear words, he's also revoked permission for film associations to clear film posters. Earlier, associations like the Filmmakers Combine, the Film Chamber of Commerce and the Association of Motion Picture and TV Program Producers had been authorized by the I&B Ministry to clear publicity material, including film posters. Mr. Nilani has revoked that. Do you sense, therefore, a greater element of rigidity, a more hardline attitude right the way across the board in the handling of these matters by Mr. Nilani?
Oh, absolutely. I think on the one hand, you find the Sangh Parivar and the Varun Gandhis and the Togadis of this world pushing the envelope on hate speech, pushing the envelope on what they can say and get away with. Bal Thackeray was never arrested, when he should have been slammed into jail for what he said. On the other hand, the trick is to make sure that the other side, or what they perceive to be the other side, which is the rest of us, how can we chop down on their ability to speak, to express themselves, to show us a different India, which we don't want to, we want to pretend, or we want to sort of airbrush out of existence. And so this is all, the whole business of the silence on the churches and now speaking out, and then, as you said, the VHP then saying actually the Prime Minister was warning the Christians. I mean, this is all absurd, turning day into night, night into day, and seeing how far you can get away with it. And when they meet resistance, like all bullies, they will backtrack, they will finesse, they will provide explanations, and they will slide sideways. And if you don't provide resistance, then they will steamroll through at every level. I mean, posters, my God, now you're going to start censoring posters in 2015 when 5-year-olds can download porn on the net? I mean, what ridiculousness is this about?
You know,
people
Mukesh,
in the villages have access to internet. How are you going to filter a country like India?
Quite true.
And stop them from accessing what they want?
You know, Mukesh, but I noticed
I think it's a separate issue that we have to protect our children's childhood. I don't think we can chuck children into a full exposure of everything or try and protect them as far as possible.
I think
poorer
Karan,
children lose their childhood early, and that's a whole separate debate.
I think it's wrong to politicize this issue.
It's wrong.
No Parivar or no political party has nothing to do with this. And these issues were had come up earlier also.
It is politicized by the Sangh Parivar. When a man like Nihalani does this, it is politicizing the issue.
Between the two of you.
I'm sorry.
I don't think we should make this a quarrel between the two. I'll come to you in a moment, Ashok Pandit. Let me go first to Mukesh Bhatt. Mukesh Bhatt, in an interview gentlemen, please, gentlemen, we're having a very fruitful, rich and analytical discussion. Let's keep it that way. Let's keep it that way. You may object to something Richard Joshi has said, but he has the right to say it, and you have a duty to respect it. Let's keep our personal animosities apart. Mukesh Bhatt, I noticed that in an interview, let me finish the question. Mukesh Bhatt, I noticed that in an interview, Mukesh, listen to me. I noticed that in an interview, Prahlad Nihalani gave The Hindu on Republic Day. He complained about live shows where short skirts and lingerie were on display. Do you feel that we are seeing a certain conservatism in the attitude of the Censor Board under Mr. Nihalani? Maybe it's a conservatism that reflects his general attitude to life. And does that worry you? Does it suggest a narrowing of creative liberty and an increase in the list of don'ts and a diminishment in what you can do? Does that worry you?
See, Mr. Nihalani is living in a completely warped time, space. He's talking about a world which does not exist anymore. We need to move. If cinema is extension to life, and cinema has to project what life has to offer. You can't talk about the bygone days in today's times. The world has changed.
Okay.
My children tell me that, Papa, the films you'll make and the colleges we go to are two different things. So we have to rise up to that. You know, I had an interesting meeting with the cultural minister of China last year. And then he asked me a very valid question, Karan, that if you have to tell me one line, what is the defining difference between the Indian film industry and the Chinese film industry? And you know what I told him? I said, we told him that we have the freedom of expression. Our makers and our writers are free to write what they want to do, the way they want to do.
No longer,
and that makes us superior.
No longer,
you see, now what Mr. Nihalani is saying, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. Which world are you talking about? The world has changed. Wake up to reality.
You know,
Ashok Pandit.
Ashok Pandit.
And a second very important thing.
Very quickly.
Sorry, I want to say one more very important thing, and that is a very important need of the year. We have to keep the Censor Certification Board apolitical. It should not be a part of any political agenda, whether it is Congress or JDU or BJP or anybody. It should be like the judiciary independent body. Because governments keep coming and going and new policies come. Where do filmmakers go with the changing of policies? There should be one law, there should be a new Cinematograph Act in place, and people should follow that.
Okay, Ashok Pandit, I'm running out of time, Mukesh, but I want to go to Ashok Pandit because he's a colleague of Mr. Nihalani's on the Censor Board. He's the one man out of this panel who can actually speak to him professionally, sitting on the board and try and influence his thinking. And I want to put this to you, Ashok Pandit. According to firstpost.com, Prahlad Nihalani in 1994 made a movie called Andaz. It got a U certificate, therefore it was available for general release. Every child could have watched it, including 2- and 3-year-old babies if they were taken there by their mothers. And firstpost.com says that that film had songs where the words were khada hai and le lo. Now clearly those were double meaning words that he was using, winking at the audience, clever, witty, funny and lascivious and naughty at the same time. And in 1984 he thought there was nothing wrong with it, and it was accepted, and those movies are still there. Surely you can now say to him that if he could do that in 1994, 23 years, 22 years, 21 years ago, why can't it be done today? Why is he setting different standards today? Why is he being hypocritical? Will you take that issue up with him?
I think, Karan, he's too senior enough and intelligent enough to know what you are telling. Nobody has to tell him that. He's aware of what he has done himself. And he's not a small child where we have to explain things to him. Coming to the point where I have to make two things very clear on this show, Karan, is that for heaven's sake, let us not politicize this issue, because bringing in political parties, this entire decision which was taken individually by Prahlad ji.
Okay.
There was no pressure of, and then film industry has faced problems during all rules of all the governments which have
your
come
second point
before
is
this
so
also.
Your second point, because we're running out of time.
Let us not trivialize. Come on, one second, let us not trivialize this issue, a very serious issue, into accusing people who are not involved in this, because it's a very serious issue.
I agree.
And as Mukesh ji rightly said, that political party people, I don't think anybody who belongs to political parties sitting here. Everybody has a right to have their choice of political parties.
Which is why I stopped you and Ruchir quarreling, because I did not want to deflect from the very core of this issue. I'm afraid I've come to the end of my time for this particular episode. I hope Mr. Nihalani is watching. I asked him to watch. I hope Shravan Kumar is watching. I asked him to watch, even though they refused to participate. We've given their side, their viewpoint, an attempt to be answered by the panel. The panel does believe that children need to be protected, but you don't need to do it by banning swear words from films that adults see. The real message is, don't treat adults like children. That is to infantilize people who have a right to see and hear cuss words if they want. My thanks to all my guests for joining me. Time for a break.